Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Anthony Smith to defeat Roman Dolidze. And don't you forget it. Actually, could you? Just forget it. Forget it ever happened. Let's move on. All right. I'm here to recap UFC 303. And I will start with the two guys that stepped up and gave us the pay per view in the first place. Because without them, without a title fight, I don't know what would have happened with this event. Maybe it would have just been moved to ESPN Plus or whatever. But this was the pay per view. It's a pay per view worthy headliner in the first place, but they also stepped up and made weight and gave us the title fight. So awesome for both guys. I hope they were really well compensated because I think they both knew they were stepping into the octagon with the other most dangerous light heavyweight on the planet, and this one was probably going to end with a concussion, and it did. We did get that concussion. Well, Yuri Prohashka got that concussion again. But yeah, awesome for both guys stepping up. This was fucking awesome. And my estimation of both guys as fighters has skyrocketed. But for Alex Pereira, this guy is the top thing in MMA, the hottest fighter in MMA right now. He's a fan favorite. I am typically a fan of like the 23rd ranked featherweight. And, I'm one of those jerk-offs. It's all real pretentious. But he is one of my favorite fighters, Alex Pereira. I don't know if there's a light heavyweight on the planet that I'd root for against him. Unless he fights Glover in a teammate versus teammate fight. But he is the man. He's stepped up on multiple occasions. He really wants it. He wants the best fights. I'll always go back to after he got knocked out by Adesanya. It was a very quick turnaround, and he was back in there with Jan Blachowicz up at light heavyweight. And the fact that he took such a risk, which I did not think was wise, paid off. And it's only paid off exponentially since then. He's only had, 4 fights as a light heavyweight. And he's he's on the fucking Mount Rushmore already of like maybe MMA altogether. What he's done has been incredible. And stepping up in a big way like this against Yuri Prohashka means he's only going to do bigger things. If he wants that heavyweight fight, I guess by that heavyweight fight, if he's talking about John Jones, that could be difficult. I'd love to see that fight more than anything, but Jones, I think, has other plans. Fight Stipe, maybe fight Elvis Sinisic, and then retire or something and say he was the GOAT, which he is. But still, I'd love to see him fight some of the new breed. And even though Alex Pereira is, 30 fuck years old, he's up there. He's still one of the new breed. And here, stepping up like this, aside from that John Jones fight, I think he can fight anybody. At light heavyweight, it will be Ankalaev next, but if he really wants a heavyweight fight, he could be fighting the winner of Aspinall versus Curtis Blades for the interim title or whatever. He's an incredible fighter, Alex Pereira, and that weapon of his, the left hook, even though it didn't get him the victory officially, it did get him the victory here. He's got such dangerous weapons. Those kicks, which were the story of this fight, they kept Yuri Prohashka at bay. Yuri did not have nearly half the success he had in the first fight. He wasn't able to bypass those kicks, and in the end, he got a little overzealous where maybe he thought he could, or he could pour it on in the end. And Alex Pereira staying very sharp up until that 300th second in the first round. He caught him in the final second, and Yuri did live the fight in round 2, but I think he was done after that left hook. I think there's a chance even a jab from Michelle Waterson could have finished Yuri off in round 2. But we'll never know how fucked up he was because he got hit with a head kick from Alex Pereira, which could probably knock out a horse. So there's that. But for Yuri Prohashka, his profile hasn't changed too much. He is, professionally, he's in the same spot. He probably retains his ranking as number 1 or number 2, and he only lost to the champion again. But this is still 2 concussions in 8 months or whatever it's been, and it is another strike against his chin, and particularly against his defense. defense is half of that, protecting your chin, and he gets sloppy. Again, I'll always go back to the King Mo loss 10 years ago, whatever, 9 years ago. But Yuri Prochazka does not protect himself. He's a little wild, and that was the story of this loss. He got clipped at the end of round one, and in round two, I think it was just a formality. It was a matter of time, and it took like fucking 10 seconds. Alex Pereira just kicked him cold. I don't think he even flicked a jab out there. It was like Gilbert Ivell versus Gary Goodridge at Pride 10. Check it out. That whole event is fucking phenomenal. But still, credit to both guys for stepping up in a big way. I fucking love that they did this. And speaking of which, that brings me to the co-main event. I made a video last night talking about my love for Dan Ige stepping up, and he has to be the story of this fight. But let me lead by saying Diego Lopez has my respect 10 times over, whatever the fuck that means. Unless that's 10 times compared to Dan Ige. I don't even know the expression, and I committed to using it. Maybe I can edit this out. I don't know. But I respect Diego Lopez 10 times more than the average man. I'll go with that. Diego Lopez weighed in 3 different times. They ended up fighting at 160 pounds, I think. No, 165. Whatever. He was ready to weigh in at whatever the original weight class was. I forget. Featherweight. And then it turned into lightweight and then halfway to welterweight. And I think the weight is incredible on its own, but also stepping up to fight Dan Ige, who you don't know what's coming at you. You assume you're in better shape, but Dan Ige is one of the best fighters in the world. He's been taking on the top 10 for the last whatever years, and he's never been finished. He's somebody you'd like to have some time to think about, maybe. So, huge credit to Diego. But Dan Ige, regardless of what he was doing, and I know he was prepping for a fight, but he was, what was he, in the sauna, they said? Getting a massage, I think he was doing. He was getting a massage when he took this fight. I could be wrong about the massage. Maybe he was, I don't know, getting something to eat. Either way, he wasn't planning on fighting, and he took the fight on a few hours' notice, like 5-6 hours' notice. That's why it was at 165. Dan Ige has my respect for life. My respect for life, because that took incredible balls. That would take balls to step up and fight Joe Schmo. But to fight Diego Lopez, who is one of the best prospects and definitely the most dangerous prospect. Just a fucking killer on the feet, on the ground, so dynamic. And he showed against Movsar Voyev, the one guy to really kick Dan Ige's ass more than the rest. He showed he's got a lot to offer, even when a fight's not going his way, Diego. So, huge credit to Dan Ige for stepping up. I will never forget this. I hope you don't either. I do wish he won. And you know what? In the end, it was close. Not close enough. I thought he definitely lost the first 2 rounds. And even more surely, I thought he won round 3. But I still have to celebrate the fact that A, he didn't get finished from Diego, and B, he won round 3, especially coming in on a few hours' notice. It looked like a fight that would have been interesting in 3 rounds on a full camp, or very interesting in 5 rounds on no camp, like last night. I think that would have been perhaps Dan Ige's fight. But he wasn't able to close the show in round 3, even though he really brought it to Diego. And he did lose the fight pretty cleanly, 29-28. But he still was the last man standing, as I like to say, and he was the man of the hour, as I think Ric Flair likes to say or something. But Dan Ige, his durability was here for him in another major way, and his balls were here for him in a gigantic way. This makes him a totally different fighter, I'm sure, in the promotion's eyes. And he and Diego both asked to fight in the Sphere, or at the Sphere, whatever, in September. And I think Dana said in the post-fight press conference that he'll grant that wish after them stepping up last night. He said tonight. But just an incredible story. And the fight itself, it may not have been so dynamic or even so dramatic, but it still was a good fight. and we learned more about Diego Lopez and Dan Ige. He made it a good fight in the end. Wasn't able to turn the tides completely in round 3, but he did take over. So just an excellent look for him. And again, both guys, my fucking estimation of both has skyrocketed. The next fight is Roman Dolidze beat Anthony Smith. This wasn't the most thrilling fight, but Roman Dolidze was just sharper than Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith has had a real hard time getting inside on Roman Dolidze, and if that's even what he wanted to do in the first place. And on the outside, he had a hard time getting to Roman Dolidze. Roman was faster and stronger, and Anthony Smith, even though he hung tough in there and did better in the end, he still wasn't able to bully around Roman Dolidze, who, despite both of them moving around and Anthony Smith being a former welterweight, Anthony Smith was supposed to be the bigger guy and definitely the fresher guy. But he was not the bully that I expected him to be. And in the end, Roman Dolidze won a decision pretty comfortably. Round 3 wasn't great for him, but still, he kept himself out of danger. And on short notice, whatever kind of shape he was in, I'm sure it was better than Dan Ige, but he stepped up here and he looked like he had no problem going 15 hard minutes with Anthony Smith. Knew he wasn't in danger in the end, and he did the much better work early against Anthony Smith. And still, I mentioned it for the other 2 fights. I may as well mention it for them. Credit to those 2 guys for stepping up. Anthony Smith stepped in to fight Carlos Olberg 3 weeks ago, and he was the fresh man in this matchup. And Roman Dolidze, whatever happened with him, he was supposed to fight Anthony Fuffy Hernandez some time ago, whatever. But he came in on just a week's notice or whatever. So, fucking awesome that they helped round out the main card, even though the fight didn't exactly deliver, to be honest. Macy Shon beat Myra Buena Silva in round 2. Got her out of there with a doctor stoppage. This was a fight that I really wanted to see go on. It's a shame it ended like that, but whatever. That was her head being split open. I thought Myra won round 1. I thought she looked sharper than Macy Shon and did a good job dealing with the unique physicality of Macy. Macy still did rough her up. Macy, I think, can bully anybody in the clinch with those knees. But I thought Myra was ahead. She wasn't able to close the show with her jiu-jitsu. She did frame an armbar, I believe, briefly. But in round 2, I can't say Macy was going to win, but she got on top of Myra Buena Silva and split her open within a few minutes, within 2 minutes there. So I can't say I would have that Macy would have won, but I would have predicted she was going to be stuffing the guard of Myra, and which I thought was her path to victory. So I thought there was a chance it was trending in her direction anyway. Still, really wish it could have gone on because Myra Buena Silva is very dynamic, and Macy Shon, she's one of the few girls that could bully a girl like Myra just with her physicality. So really had my interest. I wanted to see what round 2 looked like, and especially round 3. But in the end, she split her open. Macy's on a good streak right now. This may not be the cleanest victory or finish or whatever, but it's a great scalp, a great name to have on her record, and she's got a lot of momentum. Myra Buena Silva is coming off a title fight, so it's a great win for her, even if it's not the most definitive win or cleanest finish. Ian Gary beat Michael Venom Page. This was a more of a grappling heavy fight for Ian Gary. I thought he did a really good job mixing it up with Michael Venom Page and slowed the fight down. And not just with takedowns and pinning him like I thought he would, but he made it more of a jiu-jitsu battle and secured back control, kept the body triangle, really worked Michael Venom Page on the ground. Venom Page kept himself safe, aside from a few close choke attempts, but Ian Gary still proved to be the better grappler, and he had enough grappling to make this a grappling fight. A lot of times when I'm breaking down these fights, I'll say, yeah, this guy's got a grappling advantage, but it's not something he can sustain for 15 minutes. And Ian Gary, even though I've never seen him do that, he was able to exploit that weakness in Michael Venom Page and maintain his grappling throughout the 15 minutes. So in that regard, it was a very impressive performance from Ian Gary, but as for the fight, not so great. It just wasn't the fight that a lot of people expected with these two. I thought there'd be a lot more action on the feet. I'm sure everyone else did. And you know what? In the end, the one redeeming quality of the fight was that it was pretty close. But I still thought Ian Gary definitely won. And even though, oh no, it was a unanimous decision. I thought it was split. But Ian, I thought definitely won. But yeah, just he did so with grappling. And I could see with this matchup that would disappoint some people. And for MVP, not a bad loss at all. I thought it was a pretty close fight, even though I thought he definitively lost. And he wasn't finished. He wasn't. He was denied really what he wanted to do on the feet, and that sucks for him because on the feet he's magical. And I think we aren't done with Michael Venom Page. He'll bounce back. Joe Pyfer beat Marc-Andre Barrio in a minute and 25 seconds. He knocked him dead. Knocked him dead. He cooked him with a big right hand and had him half out, or I guess what was half out, and then caught him with a big punch as Marc-Andre Barrio was kind of halfway down, and that was it. The lights went out. That was a new wrinkle for Marc-Andre Barrio. He'd only been TKO'd once, and it was when Chidi and Njokuani just steamrolled him. But this was another strike against his chin and uh, a definitive power disadvantage here. That was the story of this fight. Joe Pyfer hits like a fucking truck, and even though some of his fights have been a little more slow paced, this was a great reminder of how dangerous he is. He is in that upper echelon of power punchers at middleweight, and he just had way too much for Marc-Andre Barrio. So Barrio, two losses by knockout in the last few years. This one was particularly brutal. He's got to take some time out and maybe some better matchups. But Joe Pyfer, yeah, this was a great return to form for him after that tough loss to Jack Hermanson, which wasn't a bad loss at all. But, with that first loss in the UFC, with all the hype he had, it definitely hurt his stock. So a great bounce back win here. He looked phenomenal. Andre Fili beat Cub Swanson by split decision. This was a really close battle. Really could have gone either way. I scored it for Cub. I bet on him. What do you want from me? I did think Cub won though, but still could have gone either way. I think Cub had the more dangerous strikes. I think he hit Andre Fili a little harder, and that's what I ultimately thought was the difference. But Fili was still very good on the counter. He had the movement. Cub was generally leading the dance and had that octagon control, but Andre Fili was incredibly agile and had some slick counters. This was a razor thin fight, uh, really a great battle between two savvy veterans. And in the end, it went Andre Fili's way, which might be for the best because he's the one with more of a future. As Cub himself said, he was in the twilight of his career here. I mean, he's 41 or whatever, so obviously. But I still thought Cub had enough to beat Andre Fili, and he did. He definitely could have won this fight. I kind of wish it went his way. I really fucking wish it went his way just for my fucking betting account. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. Jean Silva beat Charles Jourdain. There was no cookie crumbling here, no split decision. This was just a definitive knockout. Jean Silva looked incredible. Roughed Charles Jourdain up. I thought the power was the difference here in this fight. He dropped him early, I think. And in the end, coming up off the ground, threw down and caught him with a big uppercut, I think, or whatever the fuck happened. And that was it. It took Charles Jourdain completely out of the fight. He may not have been sleeping, but he was not going to resist those next strikes that were coming his way, and it was stopped. Great win for Jean Silva, or Gian Silva. I think this guy's he brings a lot of excitement inside and outside the octagon, and so far he's looked great. This is a much better win than his last one, too. I mean, beating Charles Jourdain is great, but knocking him out is phenomenal. Charles Jourdain had never been knocked out before. Only finished once, and it was a third round Darce from Julian Arosa. This here is a new wrinkle for Charles Jourdain, and for Gian Silva, this is another testament to his danger, which is it's up there. I mean, he's finished everybody but the guy in the Contender Series, I believe. Payton Talbot beat Giannis Gamori, and I am the guy who bet on Giannis Gamori. What do you want from me? was fucking 10-1. But this was still a defeat that I did not see coming. I thought Payton Talbot would win, but I didn't think it would look like this. I thought there was a chance it was a TKO and it was some excellent striking put together in combinations, but this was just one punch, a straight right on the chin, and Giannis Gamori was done. And then he followed up and took him out. 19 seconds, phenomenal. This was the most emphatic finish on the whole card, and Payton Talbot has an incredible future. I mean, that win over Cameron Simon, that was incredible. That was, and Cameron Simon still has an incredible future in MMA. Who knows what he's going to do? But Payton Talbot was too much for him. And here, Giannis Gamori may not be the most highly regarded fighter, but no one has gone through him like this. So this was a statement and a half. I hope Payton Talbot didn't hurt his hand too badly, because I'd love to see him in there again. And I don't think he got banged up too much otherwise. And Jillian Robertson beat Michelle Waterson Gomez. This was domination. I really thought Jillian would have gotten the finish, but I can't blame her for not getting the finish because I scored the fight 30-24. So she did her part. Really threatened Michelle with every different submission, in particular a lot of arm bars. But Michelle Waterson Gomez is very tough, savvy girl. She's been submitted 4 times, most of them with guillotines, but she showed she could take it here. She was thoroughly out-grappled for all 15 minutes, or like 14 minutes or whatever, but this was an ass-kicking, and it took a lot for her to survive. She kept herself from getting TKO'd when she was positionally dominated, and she kept herself from tapping when she was positionally dominated. So, tough loss for her, really tough way to go out, but she showed a lot of great traits in her retirement fight, and she can hold her head up high. But Jillian Robertson, she was too much for Michelle Waterson. Just way too much for her. And this was a fight that looked like she should have been a 10-1 favorite, like Payton Talbot, a 20-1 favorite, instead of minus 170. So great win for Jillian. Martin Buday beat Andrei Arlovsky. This is another one just like with Cub Swanson, where both those fights went the other way. I'd be a fucking millionaire. And by millionaire, I mean I'd have like $47 on me. But anyway, I kissed my $47 goodbye because the decision went Budai's way. This one really could have gone either way, but come on. What a dog shit fight. This was a famously shitty fight. And you heard John Anik referencing Gabriel Gonzaga versus Konstantin Irokin. That's the type of fight this was. By the way, if you want to see another one, check out Gabriel Gonzaga versus Kevin Jordan. Even though it ends with a violent knockout, it's just a dog shit fight. And this was a dog shit fight. A clinch battle. I thought Arlovsky would have agility and some advantages on the outside, and I do think he did, but there was no outside fighting really in this one at all. That once they settled into the clinch after about 20 seconds, that's where they stood for the whole fight. And it was a battle in the clinch. Some nice knees landed, in particular from Buday, but not one big moment, not even like one half moment in this whole fight. It was just dreadful dog shit. And of course, the decision went Budai's way, which I guess is for the better, just like I said with Cub versus Fili, because the guy with the future gets the nod. But I don't know how bright his future is, to be honest. I do think he's one of the lower end heavyweights. And for Arlovsky, yeah, you know what? I would have really liked it if he won just for my bank account. But I think he just doesn't belong in the UFC. You know, he's got a nice name. He's headlined pay-per-views. He's got some cachet, as a cocksucker might say. But he doesn't belong because every fight of his is dreadful. Even most of his losses. You know, when he's finished, it's not, I guess. But he really works hard not to be finished. And he works so hard that he stops himself from having any sort of exciting fight at all. The last exciting one was against Travis Brown. So, yeah. Sucks for Arlovsky. Wish he got more of a send-off like Michelle Waterson, but whatever. And Seruya beat Carlos Hernandez. This was another fight, much like a few of the fights I mentioned earlier, where the winner won the first 2 rounds and then held on for round 3. and he held on for round 3. But you will hear me mention in the next breakdown of his fight that of his next fight that he fell off in round 3. And Carlos Hernandez took over, and that guy Mark Clamaco had a nice punch on him in round 3 or whatever. You just have to speculate looking for weaknesses with guys like Ray Seruya with 10-0 records or whatever he's got. But here he may have shown some. Carlos Hernandez, who I thought was wily and scrappy early on, scrambly, where I thought he might have taken away the grappling from Ray Seruya even inside of round 1. But he did let himself get trapped. Ray was incredible on top, had a lot of good control, that worked that twister position, which I know Joe Rogan had one of those, it's locked, it's over, and it wasn't over. But I still really appreciate him walking everybody through the twister position because he's got such a deep knowledge on it. And even somebody like me who watches a lot of fights and whatever, I don't. I know when a triangle's coming and an arm triangle and whatever. The twister, I know when it's coming when they lace the one leg. And of course, I did wrestle. That was actually a guillotine in wrestling. I know what the twister is. But Joe Rogan really does a good job walking everybody through it. And he did here, but Ray Seruya, right when he got to the finish line, wasn't able to close the show. And Carlos Hernandez survived all that. And then in round 3, really took it to Seruya and made it a good battle. But it was a little too late, just like it was for Anthony Smith and whoever the fuck else I mentioned, Dan Ige. And Vinicius de Oliveira, beat Ricky Simon. This was a shutout, pretty much. I thought Ricky Simon was a step and a half behind throughout this whole fight. He could have turned things around with those takedowns he started landing in round 2. Hit some beautiful double legs and had some good control briefly, but he wasn't able to really mount a grappling attack. It was a few takedowns, and then they fell off. And on the feet, he had nothing for Vinicius de Oliveira. And I do think if he had a little more faith and bit down on his mouthpiece and tried to engage on the feet, that could have been his best course of action. Because again, Vinicius de Oliveira has got a few losses, and they're all knockouts. One of them's a doctor stoppage, but whatever. He was hurt in the fight, whatever the fuck. But the other 2 were knockouts. And Ricky Simon, he's definitely got some good pop in his punches, but not enough. Here he was at a significant disadvantage, and he was a little too trepidatious with the shit coming back at him to get in the pocket and try to wing some wild hooks. So he kind of let this one slip away. I think the wrestling was the game plan, and it wasn't there for him, and he wasn't able to adjust. And Vinicius de Oliveira, he looked really good here. I mean, Ricky Simon, even though this is the first fight of the night, Ricky Simon was headlining a UFC event a few months ago or whatever. So this was a gigantic step up and a gigantic victory, even if it is in the first fight of the night. Ricky is on a 3-fight losing streak now, so it may not be the prettiest win over a headliner and whatever. And I don't know what's going on with him in his future, but he definitely should have had, on paper, should have beaten Vinicius de Oliveira. The problem is this isn't on paper, and in the octagon, he wasn't able to implement his wrestling, and his striking was not there for him. So a new potential contender arises in Vinicius Oliveira. I can't ignore that first win, the win over Bernardo Sopai, even though it was a little more of a test and it's not over such a big name. That finish was phenomenal. So with that, and now this win over Ricky Simon, he's got a lot of momentum, and he's got a definite future in the UFC. He's not going anywhere for a long time. So welcome. And that wraps up UFC 303. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I tend to sound like a fucking idiot. Here's my impression of MMA al dente, right? This is MMA al dente for you. Yeah, but he has very good, really good fucking cardio, All right. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.